Welcome and good morning to the Clackamas County Board of Commissioners Policy Session on December 6th, 2023. County Administrator Gary Schmidt, you're up.
Thank you, Chair Smith. Commissioner Schrader is out of the office today. She's not feeling well. Commissioner West is walking to his seat right now. Your first policy session today is approval of 2024 state and federal legislative agendas for Clackamas County. Presenting today is Trent Wilson, Interim Government Affairs Manager from Public and Government Affairs. Go ahead, please, Trent.
Thank you, Gary. Good morning, Commissioners. I'm Trent Wilson, Interim Government Affairs Manager at PGA. And so I'm here today in front of you with the proposed state and federal legislative agendas for 2024. Really quickly for our public, but also for you, our process to build this has been to first meet with you in the early fall. We met with each of you. We heard several priorities, 3 of them loud and clear. Tolling in 205 was one of them. Courthouse was one of them. Measure 110 and sort of responding to some of that was also a big priority. So you'll see that reflected in the agendas today. We also met with all of the departments to understand what the scope of need was throughout the county. And then we also met with many legislators to start to understand what's being forecasted for 2024 and for transportation purposes 2025. So that's our process to build what we have here today. Want to just give there's been a little bit of changes, right? So I want to talk about who your team is moving into 2024. So that's me and Brian Hockaday, who's here with us today, as well as Northwest Public Affairs, they're our state team, and then we have Summit Strategies, who remains our federal team into 2024. So today I have in front of you a proposed state legislative agenda and a proposed federal legislative agenda. I'm going to recommend that we sort of tackle both of those separately and sort of approve them separately. That I think would make it easier for us to distinguish between 2 different scopes of work that we're working on. Do you agree to that process?
Yes, please go ahead.
All right. Well, let's just jump into the state agenda quickly. And for both of our agendas, they're divided into 3 sections. I think it's really helpful to go over what those are super quick. The first section is our initiatives, and I really define that as, if not for Clackamas County, no one's really going to be working on this. So that's why it's that important, right? The second category is our priorities, which are very important. We can be leaders on those topics, but we don't have to be the lead on that topic, right? And so there are things like housing, Measure 110 in here, where we're not the only people who are working on this process, unlike the courthouse or 205, which only we are working on. And then the last section is the priorities section, which really gives us flexibility to navigate those random topics that come out of the state legislature or other pieces of our body of work that maybe extend beyond our top priorities, the top body of our work that we still want to be engaged in. So you would find things in here that help us stay solvent, make sure that we have money, don't accept or receive any unfunded mandates. There's language in here that allows us to do a broad variety of work and allow us to be flexible so that we don't always have to come back to you, on your busy schedule, but it is still within the values and principles of Clackamas County. So that's how the agenda is divided up. So again, those county initiatives, if not for Clackamas County, no one's going to be working on them. 2 of them, county courthouse and transportation priorities specific around I-205 and tolling. So for the county courthouse, going and retrieving the remainder of the state match from the state legislature for what they are sort of obligated to fund within the county courthouse. And so that's the top priority. We're going into a short session, so it's only 35 days. There's no history of the state legislature funding courthouse funds like that in a short session, so this would be a little unprecedented. However, we are working with the Oregon Justice Department, who will be submitting on behalf of Clackamas County into the governor's budget. So we are optimistic that we can get some work done here. On the transportation improvement side, you see that there's a lot going on. Our priorities for the last several years have really been around the bottleneck project, I-205, and as it's adapted, the tolling conversation as well. So we wanted to make sure that there's language in here that puts that in the front, especially the bottleneck project, those 3 lanes. But we also know that there's a lot of work going into building a 2025 transportation package. And we want to make sure that we're not just working on February with this agenda. We want to be working on the whole year with this agenda. So this transportation improvement projects sort of encapsulates a variety of topics that allow us to be at all these tables as they're talking about transportation funding beyond tolling, other types of funding mechanisms, making sure that state and local, especially local, operation funding is in place, that we can be solvent to do our operations and maintenance, but also capital projects. And so you see language in here that sort of covers that. That's what you would have read ahead of time. Those are the initiatives. And before I go into the priorities, are there any questions about the initiatives?
Well, I really like the way you presented it. It's different, and explaining the difference between initiatives and priorities. I think that is very helpful, because I was reading through this early this morning thinking, now, why did they do that? Or why did Trent do that? Now I understand that. Commissioner Salas.
Yeah, Trent, I might just point out maybe a nuance here. Your statement about it's unusual for those folks to, for the state legislator to tackle the courthouse funding in a short session. I want to just point out two anomalies here. The courthouse, we were supposed to get our full allotment, and they cut that in half. Okay, so they didn't live up to that. Number two, the 205 project was legislatively directed in HB 2017. They shorted us on that as well. They put that off there without legislative action, without a hearing, without discussion, and by all appearances, it was staff, ODOT staff, right, that did that. So those are two anomalies that if we don't speak loudly about this now, there's no way, frankly, I'm gonna have a hard time having any credibility, especially on the transportation side, that part of a 2020 package, I'm gonna be all giddy and happy because it's in the package, because I already lived through that. Matter of fact, we were tasked by the legislature to go to work on that, and before HB 2017 became a bill. Okay, do this, do that, come up with a package, we'll fund it, we'll do all this, and two, I want to point out the other one. Okay, so we were tasked with that. Okay, so they come out, to our surprise, in the last 2 weeks of the 2017 legislative session, and they come out and they fund two of the bottlenecks and they don't fund ours. So this is the third hit that I don't think that they have been. I would say that collectively, and I know I'm saying this publicly, I know it's being recorded, but I'll just have to be honest with everyone, and that is, they didn't live up to their end of the bargain. So I don't know what we can do to have any kind of assurances that, if we play nice, this might happen, because that wasn't fair. In 2017, that wasn't fair. So I know puts you in a tough spot, put Chris in a tough spot, obviously, puts us in a tough spot, and frankly, I'm gonna have a hard time. I appreciate the email yesterday with the update on something you and I have been talking about, but all related to this to some degree, but I'm having a hard time gaining hope or faith that they'll live up to their end of the bargain again. It was 3 strikes. The courthouse was the third strike. Oh, no, the 205 project was the third strike.
That was the third, yeah.
Yeah. 205, taking 205 away was the second strike. The first strike was not funding 205 in 2017.
Thank you for that. Commissioner Scholl.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Wilson, for this work. I find it to be good choices. I do have a question for you, though, on county priorities, on the state initiative. The fourth one regarding the county foreclosure surplus claims issue, is that really a county priority?
It is a priority specific to counties, so yes.
Yeah.
The situation here, and would love for county council to have pitched in if they were available, but the Supreme Court made a decision in Tyler versus Hennepin County earlier this year. It changed the way that counties, in particular, here in Oregon, will have to issue tax foreclosures moving forward into perpetuity. I think Oregon was one of 12, 13, 14, don't quote me on that number, but it's close to that, states that do it the way that we've always done it, but that Supreme Court decision said you have to do it a different way. And there is no state precedent for how that's done, which means right now counties are sort of free-forming how to do that. And we were looking for a standardized process across all 36 counties. It's a priority for AOC. It's a top priority for AOC. Okay. We've been helpful to them to try to make sure that has a bill. There are lawsuits that are possible because of that Supreme Court decision, and so it is a priority for us. There's a financial impact to the county if we get sued for it.
Understood. Thank you.
Gary.
Actually, Trent just answered the second part. You were briefed on this in executive session a few weeks ago. This puts tremendous burden on counties, especially decisions you've made since the Supreme Court decision was made. It's retroactive, which means we may have to pay back owners that homes were foreclosed millions of dollars because their home may not appropriately foreclosed. So this is a huge issue, and we need state guidance to help facilitate.
Wasn't Clackamas County the first county singled out in this
We were-
potential lawsuit?
Yes.
Yeah, we were the test case. Yay.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Wilson.
Commissioner West.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, Trent. It's nice to have you here in front of us. Questions around Measure 110, addiction, recovery, those things. We have had a lot of meetings with legislators together in Salem and the Portland area. We talked about potentially putting together kind of a shovel-ready or close to shovel-ready list. And Representative Nose, who is the chairman of the Healthcare Committee and kind of spearheading a lot of this in the Oregon legislature, said that he would help champion or push our list to Senator Liebert, the majority leader in the Senate. So I'm kind of wondering if is that part of our legislative plan for basically capital dollars to help build the infrastructure that the state has divested from for decades, to kind of have the ability to rebuild those different assets that are necessary to truly provide people treatment that they deserve and should have?
Great question. Thank you. I think the short answer is yes. I'm really looking for y'all's help and direction about what those capital projects are that we would prioritize. Trent knows of a couple of projects that are important to Clackamas County, like the 23-hour Crisis Stabilization Center.
Yep.
Fits in the ballpark of this sort of work. And I think that is probably a project that I know has some funding, but if we can go get some state funds, it might free up some things here otherwise, right, in February. So that might be a project that y'all consider. It's not for Trent to say that that's one to chase yet, but I've been looking for your direction on that moving forward. I know you have talked about a recovery campus, and I think that that's contemplative right now, but if there are steps or progress in that direction that will enable us to ask for money in February, I'd happy to go do that, and I think the language here gives me plenty of guidance to go and do that. Just give me the list, so I'll be looking to y'all for that. And I heard yesterday too that y'all talked about a value statement of sorts that y'all want to attach to your Measure 110 work. I would just say that actually provides a lot of benefit to the work that you're doing here. So if you approve this language here, the value statement is on top of what you approve here. And we've done that in the past, right? With the I-205 and tolling value statements, with the housing statements. Those have been in addition to our agenda. It provides better clarity around what your direction is for those topics.
And am I correct in my perception? I'm just asking for your thoughts and opinion. When we met with a lot of these legislators, they seem to be open to some capital funding potentially for building out these assets, that was not a wild ask to think of if we could show we were competent and ready.
The legislature wants to do something now. They want to show that they can make some adjustments to what has sort of transpired since the passage of Measure 110, and putting money towards recovery infrastructure is one of those ideas. I think that there will be money. I don't know what that number is yet. That's not been public yet. You testified on Monday to the committee that will be doing a lot of that work. We'll see what their budget is. But it will be nice to have a project list ready to go so that we can say we can turn this over now, or we can get something moving soon.
Yeah, and I'm glad that you have this as one of our priorities. I just think that there's an opportunity here for us to kind of pounce on. So yeah, thank you.
Yeah, regarding your third bullet about state mandated, I've been making the case to a lot of my commissioners across Oregon and AOC. If AOC would only, if we were in a situation that we only had to concentrate on one topic, it would be no more unfunded mandates to counties, no more partially funded mandates to counties. And your third bullet doesn't say that. You're kind of beating around the bush about it. It's asking for more money, and then you just throw the word mandate. I would like to see that rewritten.
You'd like to see the specific phrase, no unfunded mandates.
No more unfunded or partially funded mandates. Because you read that and they're just going to gloss over it. And you can say, and advocate for legislation that provides sufficient predictable revenue. That's fine. But, we deal, as you know, Trent, we try to enact laws that the legislature passed to us. And, geez, we can't do this because either we don't have the availability of land, We don't have the resources, we don't have the staff, we don't have this, we don't have that. So I think we really need to bring that home. I believe other counties will be advocating for the same thing in their departments too on that. But this is very good for the state, thank you. So if you could rewrite that third bullet?
But point of clarification, please. Happy to do that and make those adjustments. Before I do, at the bottom of the third page of the priorities, it's in the last sentence there, it kind of goes in that second to last line. It does say, should not impose unfunded mandates.
Well, you know what, that's the end of page 3.
So you want it up front. Great.
I want to bring it up because you know what? I was in the legislature with lots to read. By the time you get to that, I'm done reading for this.
Fair enough.
Let's go on and read. That's the way it works.
Message received, we'll fix that.
Thank you. Okay,
I don't even see it.
Commissioner Schrader.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. And yes, I agree. I was in the legislature too, a lot of times. We
here
get
it is.
buried in reading the legislature and here.
Yes.
But one of the things I wanted to mention, and I wanted to make sure that I brought to your attention, Trent, as our key policy person at the federal level and colleagues, just got back from the National Association of Counties. They have the American County Platform and Resolutions for 23-24. I would like to make sure that all of you get a copy of this because, for example, the Farm Bill is coming up. And I know that one of our priorities that we're seeing in the document you gave us is an agricultural priority. My own committee, Community, Economic, and Workforce Development, it works with Human Services to try and increase capacity across, for childcare across the spectrum because they're finding that it is a huge workforce barrier. People aren't going back to work because we have childcare deserts. So they're working on policies of that kind. You do know we use so much CDBG dollars? We're the committee that lobbies to make sure that those dollars, our Community, Economic, and Workforce Development Committee is the committee that lobbies to make sure that the Department of Commerce continues to fund opportunities for counties for economic development. And we in this county work with Greater Portland, Inc., which is our recruitment arm with our economic development professionals here in this county to work on the comprehensive economic development strategy. And given all of this, they have policies on agriculture and rural affairs, including rural infrastructure, which sometimes I don't think we're paying enough attention to because we have rural communities that could be accessing dollars from the USDA for rural infrastructure, from everything to roads to water systems to utilities, so on and so forth. They have an environment, energy, and land use, and of course that's pretty important when it comes to basically our actions on land use and what the federal level is doing and where we can hook into that. In particular, they have a very, very robust public lands program as well. And I would really like to see us potentially take a closer look at some of these other national platforms because it will give us not only access to our federal delegation that we are currently working with very closely, but oftentimes going with other fellow commissioners from across the United States, you get to meet the chairs of committees and movers and shakers that are not from our delegation, but yet are going to be key to passing through some of that federal legislation there. So I have it pulled up, colleagues. You can download it, but would you just like me to try and get you copies of it all?
Yeah, give us copies.
Okay, I'd like to do, and Trent, I think I gave your department a copy of the last one, or at least all of the resolutions that every committee in NACO moves forward every legislative session for its federal agenda. I don't know if you've still got a copy of it, but I'd like to make sure that we integrate our federal agenda with some of the national agendas, because it will give us I think it gives us far more visibility and clout at that level, and it's an important piece of what we do. So I'm sorry, that's my soapbox.
Okay, are there any more questions regarding the state agenda before we delve into the federal agenda?
Oh, I was ahead of myself.
Yes.
Yay.
Mr. Savas?
Yeah. So two other things, Trent, and I think the conversation about a value statement just triggered a thought I've been sharing, and that is that back in 2017 when we were pitching for the bottlenecks, I think what we didn't do, all the counties, not a staff thing, but what we didn't do is really tell people why those were important projects. And I do know that in conversations with, state leaders, the Governor Brown, for example, at the time doing her tour, what's the most important transportation projects? She came back with the statement that it was the metro region bottlenecks that were important to the entire state because they were impacting moving product and farming goods and so forth. So it was a statewide, basically, solution promise, if you will. So it's not just, this is not a Clackamas County thing or a Multnomah County thing or Portland because of the Rose Quarter or whatnot. This is really a state issue, frankly. So I really wonder if maybe a value statement around at least the 205 project coming from us is something that we never did do. We did on the tolling we have, but not on why, not on the diversion. We have currently and constant communication with the 3 mayors along that 7-mile corridor, very strong concerns and comments. They are keen on this, and I think of a value statement, I think they would gladly sign on while they're still in office, because if this drags on another 2 or 3 years, who knows what the elected leaders are going to be. I'm assuming they'll adopt it, but I think we ought to seize the moment and craft up a value statement on why the 205 bottleneck is such an important issue on safety, and frankly, leverage the climate one as well, because that's one of the pillars in which the state claims that they really care about. So that's one thing I wanted to mention. Another thing related to 217, which I think we were slighted on, and I try to bring this up. I've talked to a number of folks at the state level, including recently, just 3 weeks ago, the chair of the Oregon Transportation Commission on the new transit tax that was imposed as a result of HB 2017, which taxed the employees with the principle of we would deliver service to where they live for that last mile or first mile, however you want to say it, so that they would get transit where they live because the dollars were going to where the employer was, not to where they lived. Well, the State Rules Committee flipped that in favor of TriMet's lobbying, and lo and behold, we got shorted again. So I think that's so to speak, a promise or an intent that wasn't delivered on. That's one thing. The other one is a recent bill I think that passed this year was, I forgot the bill number, but on orphan highways, it was a bill that passed on orphan highways. Are you familiar with that bill?
I can go, I don't remember the number, but yes.
Yeah. Go back and look at that bill. The way it's written, it looks to me from the charter, it was brought attention to the charter, not the bill, but the charter. It looks to me the way it's written is going to favor the biggest cities in the state and not the smaller jurisdictions. I consider us a smaller jurisdiction. I know we're a big jurisdiction, county in the state, but in our arena, we're the small guy, right? I'm afraid that the way that's written, that's not going to, the criteria, the charter, way it's chartered is going to be, I'm concerned again, the bill passes, this kind of related to yesterday, a bill passes and then they change it with rulemaking, whatnot. So if we're not diligent all the way through to the rulemaking and the interpretation of it, we'll all be on the losing side again. So those are two, so that 2017, that's a fourth one for me, going back to the first three, is that was the intent, and the intent, we're not realizing that intent. So therefore, our transit argument that's in here needs to be strengthened, I think, personally.
Gary, regarding a value statement on the I-205, I think we have made enough, we collectively as this board has made enough statements, and we can glean that information from other positions we've taken. Would it be too problematic, Trent and or Gary, to put together just a one-pager value statement on I-205? And is it clear to you what Commissioner Salas is asking for?
Yes, I would love to work with, I hear what you're saying. I would love to work with the Transportation Department to figure out what the 205 messaging could be, the timing, and we have weekly meetings with that team and you, and we can talk more about that in a more strategic way beyond sort of this. So I think that it is possible. I had a similar thought, right? We have this very recent, it is tolling forward to Commissioner Savis's point, but it does specifically call out the projects from House Bill 2017, prioritizing the third lane. That's, that's a big deal for Clackamas County, but it's in there with a bigger topic. It's not specific to like why that project is important to our districts. And it has the logos of a lot of jurisdictions, and other our partners in the region are signing similar value statements. And so I do think we have some good information to glean from. I don't think it would take us that much work to do it. Just we need to figure out what it needs to be, what the target is with it. And so
Well,
we
I
can work
think
together on that.
One of the important, and we have data to prove that, is Clackamas County is growing to the detriment of our county to the north of us. We gained over 10,000 people in a one-year period from 21 to 22. And where are they going? I mean, they're on our freeways. They're on I-205 trying to get here to there because they still have jobs someplace, but they chose Clackamas County. So that's a very important statistical piece that we can use in that I-205 value statement. Commissioner West.
Commissioner Schrader, I'm super glad that you're back. We've been talking about often the crisis. I think it's a crisis around our ability for our first-hand responders to get to emergencies in a timely manner. We have issues with AMR. I think I talked to the fire chief yesterday, Clackamas County Fire Chief. There are pressures on them even, and there are major workforce issues nationally in this sector. We talked about that a little bit yesterday. In the last 24 hours, something that I think's come up that's got maybe a little bit of steam, that is something that is forefront in our conversations, is how do we help address creatively the workforce issue, especially with paramedics. So I'm going to give you guys a quick update. I contacted Senator Hayden's office, and he talked about the possibility of adding a priority bill, one of his priority bills, to help address this issue creatively. I talked to Randy Lauer, the board chair of TV&FNR, and the vice president of AMR, and then the Clackamas County Fire Chief yesterday. Just from being in the U.S. Navy, we have a number of corpsmen who they're more than an EMT, but they're not a paramedic. They float in the middle. They're kind of in no man's land, and it's not an easy transition or easy pathway for them to go from their skill set that from corpsman to paramedic. And so we talked about trying to find a creative bridge solution through OHA rulemaking process, giving an OHA, because they control the licensure for paramedics. We ask OHA to have a rulemaking process to create a bridge program with like AMR, because they do in-house training, and the fire department. They were all excited about this, to help corpsmen have a fast track to paramedic, to help fill, because there's people who want to be paramedics, and we need a need of paramedics, right? So trying to bridge those two things together. And so there's some creative conversations in like the last 24 hours around that. I didn't know if we at least wanted to be involved as a board in the conversation of at least trying to help creatively with the legislative process, have a bridge program that helps get more paramedics out of the military.
Gary.
Commissioners, with respect, you have a 35-day legislative session, and we're going to get one item. Your agenda is pretty full already, with respect. So if you'd like to add that, what would you like to take off?
I think the only item we're going to get is our courthouse funding. I think these ideas are fantastic, but you know what? We can only do what they can only do, and they're not going to do a whole lot. As a matter of fact, the word I got is they're just going to maintain the status quo on some of these really high-level topics, probably except for our courthouse funding.
I agree. We may not get it, but another senator who wants to champion it.
Well, fine.
Right, and we give, hey, get the conversation started. That might be
Trent, did you
something we
want to
can
say
do.
something?
Just that we just want to affirm that we do have workforce language within our priorities or within our principles side of things. We can be supportive of bills like that if they are presented.
Okay.
And we can talk with you during the session to see if
Why don't
that's.
we talk about this offline?
Perfect, let's do that.
Okay,
Yeah.
because that is important.
Yeah.
I mean, I know it's important, but we can only do what we can do. Commissioner Schrader.
Yeah, I was going to suggest, Commissioner West, that we should get the whole force of our workforce board behind this.
I agree.
And as you said, Trudy, no, I'm sorry.
We-
I know
we-
that you're impatient.
No, I am not impatient, Commissioners. Don't call me impatient when I'm trying to adhere to the time schedule that you all know what's in front of us, okay? we still have the federal agenda, and we've spent a half hour. Okay.
I stand corrected, Chair.
Yes.
I love you very much.
Yes, that's
But
fine.
That being said, let's talk about this offline. Let's see what pipeline, because, yes, we're only talking about a 40-day session, and it is just going to be about the courthouse. We all know that. That's the only thing that we can really push for. But we can start setting the table for the long session is
Yep.
what I think we, as idea people, are kind of jumping to very quickly. But you're right, it is the courthouse, and we have been mistreated, and anything I can do to help to change the tone down there and talk to our delegation, I'd be,
Thank you. We're going to
Glad to
move
do
on,
so.
Trent, to the
So-
federal agenda.
Thank you. So I only have the slight amendments within the unfunded mandate section is what I've heard as big changes with what's presented here today for the state. Is that correct?
Yeah, and then Commissioner Savas's value statement on 205.
Correct. In addition to what the agenda says.
Yes,
Great.
yes.
Gotcha.
And we can use that for other things as well.
Thank you. So on the federal side of things, same format, initiatives, priorities, and principles. One initiative, 205, it's a federal highway, gets federal funds. We want to make sure it has federal funds, and we want to make sure it's formatted here a little differently, rather than like the language that you'll see in the agenda, which is normally a nice publication. You just see our objectives, what we're going to be working on here in the 2024 year. So we want to make sure that this remains a regional priority, the bottleneck project, so that it can actually achieve federal funds. It's got to do both of those things. And there's a lot of work that we've been able to do with freshman Representative Lori Chavez-DeReamer. So she's been doing great work on behalf of this project and for Clackamas County. We want to keep up that relationship. And so that's the initiative at the federal level. Everything else, very consistent with what you've seen in your federal agendas in the past. I'm not going to go through all of them. Forestry, Willamette Falls locks, housing are the big ones, because especially with housing, we receive a lot of funds to do that work. And the ag bill, as you mentioned, Commissioner Schrader, we wanted to make sure that that was called out in here, because they will be working on it this year, and if there are priorities that we have, we want to be able to participate.
Okay, thank you. Commissioners, at 12 o'clock, we have an employee recognition lunch, of which I will be presenting, and our employees are very important. So if there's something else that bears discussion that's not directly to do with the topics presented to us today, I'd really appreciate talking to us, individually on this. We all have good ideas. We all have an incredible amount of ambition and wherewithal, but we are a little bit time constrained today, and so I'm trying to accommodate all the needs that have been put on the schedule today. Do we have any comments regarding the federal plan? And now the federal plan can be more flexible, because we are not time constrained like we are on the state one because of our 35-day session. So as federal issues come up, I think we can nuance this a little bit more later on. Trent, is that correct?
That is absolutely correct. They are on a 2-year calendar. They move very slow. It takes an act of Congress is a phrase for a reason. We have room to breathe. I will say that there's the earmarks process, and that will come to you in the future. It is separate from this process.
Oh, absolutely. That's very important.
and I already sucked the air out of the room with the federal agenda, right? So anyway.
Yeah, okay, yeah. But no, what you say is very important, and that bears a longer discussion than what you did today.
Right.
Yeah, okay.
I'll make sure everybody gets information.
We're going to move on, Commissioners. We're going to move on. Gary, don't we have a policy session at 10:30?
You do, yes.
Okay, what's the next policy session?
So actually, we're seeking your approval today, though, of a vote on both these
Do you
agendas.
need a motion, or do
Yes,
you
please.
need
A
a
motion.
head nod? Does somebody want to make a motion?
Yeah, I'd like to move to approve both the state legislative policy agenda and the federal legislative policy agenda as presented by Mr. Wilson this morning.
If I can make a friendly amendment to include the amendments as discussed.
Certainly.
Second.
Is that okay, Commissioner Scholl?
Yes.
Okay, is that clear, Gary, the motion?
Yes.
Okay. Any further discussion? Commissioners, I'm going to ask, please be brief. Do not put me in a situation that we are running over and we're late to the luncheon. Commissioner Savas.
Yeah, just real quickly, Chair, just almost a point of order that I don't want to ruffle any feathers, but, with the limited time we have is self-imposed by the agenda being set for only half an hour on these topics. So, I'm happy to work whatever extra days or hours it takes. We have time available, but, having a half-hour session or half-hour sessions like this is not very productive. That's my 13 years of experience speaking.
Your 13 years of experience is wonderful. However, when it was brought to us to set the agenda, the people presenting said, we can do this in a half hour, and that's what was brought to me. But if we want to come back after lunch and work this afternoon, I can do that too. My experience has been, however, commissioners leave, and they don't want to work in the afternoon. Yes, Gary, what's next?
All right, thank you, Trent, very
You need
much.
to take a vote. You need to take a
Oh,
vote.
I'm sorry, yes, the vote.
Tony, please call the poll.
Commissioner Savas.
Aye.
Commissioner West.
Aye.
Commissioner Schrader.
Aye.
Commissioner Shull.
Aye.
Chair Smith.
Aye, motion passes 5-0. Thank you very much. What's next?
Thank you, Trent and PGA team. Next policy session is Emergency Declaration Overview. The team from the Office of Disaster Management, that is Daniel Nybauer, Director of Disaster Management, will present. I asked for this, commissioners, that every time we have a new board, we just give you a refresher on how to declare an emergency when that time arises, and we haven't done that yet, so that is why we're doing this today. Daniel, go ahead, please.
Thank you. Good morning, Chair Smith, Commissioners, Administrator Schmidt. I'm Daniel Nybauer, Office of Disaster Management Director. As you know, you have several roles before, during, and after an emergency. Before an emergency includes pre-incident policy direction, formalizing codes, agreements, emergency plans that are needed to be successful to respond. During an emergency, you support response by maintaining the continuity of government and formally declaring emergency when it is needed. After an emergency, the BCC supports ongoing efforts and disaster assistance. This can continue for many years. But today, we're here to specifically discuss emergency declarations. So let's start on the next slide with a brief overview of how the BCC interfaces with the Emergency Operations Center, or EOC, during an incident. The EOC is organized in alignment with the National Incident Management System. Not only is this a best practice, but allows us better communication with on-scene incident management teams. While the EOC response staff are working hard on strategic and tactical needs of the incident, the EOC command and county administrator are in communication with the board regarding incident updates, as well as to identify any potential policy needs. While emergency policies have often been established beforehand, incident-specific policy decisions on resource and administrative needs of an incident may be recommended or requested by the EOC command or the county administrator. In a large incident, one of these may be the need for an emergency declaration. On the next slide, we define the county code defines an emergency well, which is any man-made or natural event or circumstances causing or threatening loss of life, injury to persons, the environment, or property, human suffering, or financial loss to the extent that extraordinary measures must be taken to protect the public health, safety, and welfare. The second part is key. The county and our local response partners respond to incidents every day. An incident becomes an emergency when it is beyond our day-to-day capabilities to stabilize the incident. When the emergency is declared within the county, the emergency operations plan is enacted and the EOC is activated. An emergency won't be declared every time, but this is how we are defining an emergency. On the next slide, we talk about what does an emergency declaration do. So there are three main reasons. One, to put the county in an emergency road by formally declaring the authority, invoking the authority that in there, and the implementation of the emergency plans. Formal assistance request up to the state. The state law requires that the assistance for federal or state be submitted as an emergency declaration. And two, to authorize any emergency measures that may need to be taken as part of there. By placing it, the county in a state of emergency, and empowers the chair to assume centralized control of and have authority over all departments, divisions, and offices of the county in order to implement the provisions in County Code Chapter 6. And it provides the county administrator and the EOC the authority to use all county resources as necessary to manage the incident and implement the measures in the declaration. So on the next slide, we talk about what's included in the information that needs to go into a declaration. The first is a clear description of the emergency and its impacts. Next is what emergency measures need to be implemented. These could include things about evacuating people from different emergency areas, suspending standard procurement bidding procedures, barricading streets and roads, establishing a curfew. These are just a couple of examples. The declaration already has some drafted in there if needed. Others can be added. Any additional measures that aren't identified in the initial declaration do need an amendment to that declaration to include. So they have to very specifically be checked in that declaration. A statement that all local resources are committed or are expected to be committed or exhausted as part of the response, and what resources may be needed from the state, as well as a description of the geographical boundaries and any time limits for the declaration. There is a 2-week maximum. It can be extended if needed, but there's a 2-week maximum to that declaration. Next, briefly talk about the process. As in the case with incident responses, emergency declarations typically start at the local level. So first, specifically within city jurisdictional boundaries, if the city executive determines that city will be in the local ability to respond will be exceeded or expected to be exceeded, they may do that declaration and pass that declaration to the county with a request for assistance and then and potential further submission to the state if needed. For a county declaration, if the incident is occurring in unincorporated Clackamas County or a city declaration is looking to be needed to escalate to the state for assistance, the declaration will be here at the county level. The request or recommendation of that is coordinated through EOC command, county administration, and the county council being drafted and then elevated to the board. The declaration is then presented to the board for approval. If circumstances for some reason prevent timely action by the board, in other words, the boards cannot be together, the chair may declare that state of emergency and seek approval of a majority of the BCC at the first available opportunity. If the chair is unavailable, the vice chair of the Board of County Commissioners may go for that process. If the vice chair and the chair are also not available, then the remaining members of the Board of County Commissioners in the order of seniority may go through that process. And heaven forbid, if none of the board is available to perform those duties, then the county administrator or the designee may initiate the process. It still always ends with, at the first available opportunity, having the board come together and ratifying that decision. Once the copy of that emergency declaration is complete, it is forwarded to the State Emergency Coordination Center. And the emergency declaration may not always include that request for assistance. If we're just looking for certain emergency measures, like evacuating personnel or establishing a curfew or something like that, we may not always do that request for assistance. And if it is needed and not included in that first draft, it does need to be amended and due there. Once the submission goes to the state, we will be coordinating impact assessments with the Oregon Department of Emergency Management, and that will be assessed by the governor. If further assistance is needed, if the state can't provide that assistance, then the governor will be looking to make a declaration up to the federal level and to the president, and there'll be coordination of damage assessment for that go there. And then if it is beyond the state and federal, local and state capabilities, then the federal will assess whether they will do a declaration to provide federal assistance. A couple limitations. An emergency declaration at the county level does not ensure that there will be an assistance or resources of any type. Only the governor can approve or direct state resources assisting the county, with some exceptions of things that have already been delegated. Only the governor can request federal assistance. Federal assistance can only be authorized by the president or, in a few cases, by some of the department secretaries. An emergency declaration at the county does not ensure state or federal reimbursement for any response activities until that declaration occurs. And an emergency declaration only applies to at the county level, only applies to the unincorporated counties, unincorporated portions of the county, and any incorporated areas where the jurisdictions have requested county assistance. Okay, with the one exception being a health emergency declaration, that does apply countywide. So on the next slide, what I'd like to do is run through a very brief scenario before we get to questions, although if you have a very pressing question that needs to go, I'm hoping the scenario may help answer a few of these questions. So I'd like to simulate that it is July 5th, just after Independence Day celebrations. Many people have taken long weekends to celebrate, and that may include some of the members of the board and county staff. However, the dreaded Cascadia earthquake does hit, which is a magnitude 9 earthquake along the Cascadia Fault. strong shaking through all of Clackamas County with significant impacts that are listed there. The EOC is activated and emergency communications have been established with the state. The EOC command, along with the county administrator, determined that there is a need for a declaration requesting state assistance, specifically establishing curfew and barricading streets to prioritize emergency traffic and establishing evacuation areas in Oregon City and the town of Willamette due to landslides and continued earth movement caused by the earthquake. So, that being the case, I am hopefully we can start by simulating and saying that the entire board is able to respond. What questions would you have of EOC Command or the county administrator to go through the process of approving a declaration?
I don't have any questions. I thank you for the update on how this is done. I do, one question of a past emergency. When the wildfires came and the cities of Estacada and Molalla were severely impacted, now, did they declare their own emergencies and then brought it to the county and the county declared, was it an emergency countywide, Gary?
Yes,
Okay, but did the cities do that first?
we did it first.
We did it first, so they didn't have to?
Correct.
But Daniel said that emergencies are declared in unincorporated only, and these are incorporated cities.
Daniel, would you like to answer this question?
Certainly. It is, as my understanding, that the cities should be declaring first before it goes to the county. I do know that the state and the feds can declare without that local level, so I think they're, and I can check with county council, I think there may be exceptions when a local jurisdiction is determined to be unable to ask for that declaration.
Sure, then the
That-
state would step in.
Then
And maybe they did, I don't know.
then
I
that
wasn't-
declaration can
I
happen.
wasn't the commissioner then.
Yeah, there's also a slightly different declaration up for fire sometimes if it's under a federal fire, what they call an FMAG, a
Okay.
federal
Good.
declaration.
Gary, your light is on?
Yes. Wow, the fire was so long ago, I forgot. But my memory is it happened so fast, the county did the first declaration. Maybe the cities did it after. If Nancy's listening, she can text me or call
Yeah.
back. But my comment was more about the scenario. So if I may start. So Daniel is going to contact me first, and I'm going to say, this is serious. And then I'm going to contact Chair Smith. Now, the question is, are telephones working? Are cell phones working?
Well, telephones and cell phones would not typically be working, so we would definitely have communications. I'm lucky enough that Gary hiked his way all the way from his home into the EOC to get there. But we may have significant difficulty reaching commissioners if telephone and cell phone are not available.
So if there's no cell phone or communications, I somehow am going to find a way to reach Chair Smith, whether I'm going to walk or drive to your house or somehow find a way to communicate with you. And if I can't, or you're unavailable, then I'm going to try Vice Chair Shull. And if I'm going to go down the line, Commissioner Schrader would be next in seniority, then Commissioner Savas, then Commissioner West. I mean, we're just talking this through. Hopefully, though, I can reach Chair Smith. And then
Are cell phones our only means of communication?
They're not the only means of communication. Our EOC has several different methods and backup. We have both satellite and radio. And so one of the methodologies that we would use that I would be giving to Gary to help is amateur radio. And the amateur radio network through the county is very extensive. We have volunteers that come and staff those radios for us. And we would definitely be reaching out and through Gary, having knowledge of where you may be, seeing if we can get some of those volunteers to be able to establish communications with you through radio potentially could be a source of doing that. We also have satellite phone capability to reach the state for resources that may be able to come in to do that. So it may not be, even if cell phones are down, we may have ways to reach you, so you may be contacted through a slightly atypical means.
I have a landline at my house still, for the reasons if cell phones go down, and they will. But if it's a 9.0 earthquake, as in your scenario, those will not be operational either. And furthermore, if we do have a 9.0 earthquake, because I attended, the last time I was a commissioner, I think in 2016, about 50 or 75 county employees went back to Emmitsburg, Virginia for training at the National Emergency Preparedness Center, and we were there for an entire week with a real-life scenario. They went around the county and took pictures of the devastation of what would happen. Gary may not be able to be in his car on passable roadways and bridges may be out. So we really need to look at something else. I have a landline and I have a radio. I can communicate with my neighbors, but I'm limited on the distance it can go. So in my neighborhood, which is several miles, we're prepared for our own survival, but outside that, communications could be very difficult. I believe Commissioner Savas and then Commissioner West.
Yeah, I turned my light on not to speak about this particular thing, but I do think that you may or may not have access to email. You may or may not have a hard line versus a cell tower, so it's hard to say what goes out, plus all the things that was just mentioned. But I turned my light on for this MMI thing. I understand this is a scenario, but I always I'm like I'm more curious, possibly concerned about this index because, how it's used. So, granted, we always talk in Richter scale, right? But where the epicenter is where it's at, and the impacts are spread across. So I'm just kind of curious how this MMI is being used, because sometimes people will interpret things differently, right? Martha might say, this is really severe, and I would say, oh, that's nothing, it's minor, but that's not for us to interpret. But I'm just kind of curious how this was being used. I just always worry about people's sense of what shaking is versus what's actually something that's measurable with a metric.
Well, and there certainly is cases if I think it's called Did You Feel It under the USGS that has it for small earthquakes, and you can definitely sense that there's some people are more sensitive to the shaking or not. This has defined metrics that talk about shaking of certain objects, certain size buildings, movement of more inanimate objects that describe and determine what that shaking is, which is then translated into impacts to building and other infrastructure. So yes, different people may feel the shaking different and have perception, but there is a scale that's associated with the modified Mercalli index, and that helps us better assess where damage what damage could be, where the ground movement and the Richter-based scales are a little tougher to make that assessment on some of the infrastructure and buildings.
Okay, so I was curious how it was being used.
Yes.
So you answered my question, thanks.
Commissioner West.
Yeah, not sure if we've got an answer to your question, Chair, on the best way to communicate with the board. I don't know if we have I literally don't know what to do, but like if we have walkie-talkies or like if we have something that in case of emergency that we flip them on or we know to flip them on to be in communication with the county. I think actually understanding how we could communicate is important. I'm not clear on what that is. I don't know how to use a shortwave radio. I do not own one. I live in the suburbs. So I don't it's a different reality, but I'm open to having that conversation about how we could, within, I don't know, what is this, a 20-mile radius from where we're at, be able to reach the county in a case of emergency. I think it's important, whether it's wildfires or a Cascadia.
Gary.
So up to this point, we've been fortunate that cell towers, internet have remained during the prior county emergencies, but we do need Daniel to be prepared, especially a Cascadia event where all communications are wiped out. How will, particularly staff, communicate with the Board of Commissioners? So we need to work on that and have a solution for you. And maybe we give you each a walkie-talkie or we give you a ham radio. We'll figure that out. But up to this point, we've been fortunate. Communications have not been broken.
I do think we need further discussion on this. Do satellite phones work if all the cell towers are out?
Yes.
Okay, well, that may be the easiest, although a little bit expensive maybe.
They're a little pricey. We can come and show the options, talk about current options that you would have, perhaps not directly on you or near you, but fire stations typically are associated with the amateur radio network.
Why don't you get together with Gary and discuss the options and the cost? Ham radios are not cheap, by the way. We looked into those, and they're quite expensive, and you have to have a pretty large tower, because it is old technology, but it works. It works really well. Martha.
I actually had a question for Commissioner Shull. From your military experience, what suggestions would you have in terms of the
Martha, Mike?
I said I was kind of curious about, given your military experience and being in dangerous situations, how did the military handle?
Well,
I know the Guard would probably get involved, I imagine.
yeah, the military is set up with worldwide communications and redundant systems down to the tactical level, which we couldn't even begin to replicate here. But one thing I might add is our fire departments have redundant communications. And that's something to think about. If all communications go down, you need to get a hold of me. You could contact the Sandy Fire Department. I bet you they could get somebody to me to send a message.
Yeah, just know where your fire department is.
Yeah.
That's where you want to go.
Absolutely.
That might be the solution, is we just have a designated emergency location for you to go to, police stations too, and then that way we know that's how to contact you. We'll work on some proposals for you. Sure.
Thank you, Daniel.
Very good, yes. Yeah, this has been interesting, and certainly thought-provoking. Okay, thank you. Gary?
So I'm sorry, if I may wrap it up, thank you, Daniel, for doing this. So the key, commissioners, is if there's an emergency or if there's a fire or an ice storm or an earthquake, just wait. And that the Chair Smith will I'll start the process with Chair Smith, and that we'll communicate with all of you on what to do. Don't feel respectfully that you all have to take action. Chair Smith's the first point of contact, and then we'll communicate with you immediately on next steps, and she'll convene a meeting of the board. So that's the kind of the first step when there's an emergency.
So Gary, could you talk about the person in charge in those emergencies? It's not really the county commission, right? It's usually the fire chief in some instances or law enforcement. So can you just talk about that chain of command?
I'm going to ask Daniel to help. Yes, Daniel.
Sure, I can discuss that. Through state and county code, Gary is the emergency manager for the county, and that's delegated to me for the county activities that we're responsible for, which is often being good mass care and taking care of people. For the direct incident response, it would be the local fire chief or battalion chief, the incident command for that fire. Same with law enforcement. They would be in charge of a law enforcement incident. Any requests that are outside of law enforcement or fire would come up to us, and we would help with those resource requests, as well as displacement of personnel or other protective measures that are needed to protect the public, whether it be evacuation, providing a shelter, providing food, water. That would be a county operation, and we would be in charge of doing that. So we work in a unified command in those instances with those jurisdictions, those agencies, or jurisdictions if it's a city and a city requests assistance. But we would be operating through those authorities to do that.
Yeah, I bring that up only to say, because during the fires, the 2020 fires, we had a little bit of a, not us, but there was a little bit of kerfuffle of who was in charge between law enforcement and fire at the time. I
Yes.
recall.
I've had some additional training in this too, and what I read, I do not have your extensive knowledge, that your incident commander is selected based upon the type of emergency it is. Is that correct?
For the specific incident scene, yes, and even for how we respond in the EOC, that is the case. For example, with Camp Creek Fire, I was in unified command with Sheriff's Office for the evacuation, but the county was also responsible for sheltering. For the Oddie Road Fire, it was with the development agency, as it was their building. So we do take the agency that's responsible for specific actions and has a majority of the responsibility to respond and work.
Yeah, so I
directly
guess the
with them.
point I'm trying to make is the incident commander could change depending on the type
Yes.
of emergency.
Yes, and it can shift through the progression of the emergency as well.
Sure.
Yeah, so in your scenario, Cascadia earthquake 9.0, there's buildings down, there's natural gas issues, I mean, water failure everywhere. Default, who's in charge right off the bat, typically?
It would be a unified command between the county. It would be probably disaster management, sheriff's office. We would look for a fire representative to be doing that. And through transportation, probably roads, it would be 4 or 5 people that were working together in command to set
Yeah,
objectives.
I just want to make sure that there's never a dispute in those kind of emergencies, who's in charge, because that leads to more chaos.
Yes, and for better or for worse, with the smaller scale emergencies we've had, like Camp Creek and Oddie Road, we've been able to work through a lot of those and build relationships that I think will help mitigate those disagreements.
Okay, thank you. I see no further questions. Thank you for the presentation.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah,
The
Gary, what's
the next policy session is the County Counsel Position Profile and Adoption of Hiring Procedures. Chair Smith, there is a particular script for this one because we need to do a public hearing. So Chair, go ahead, please.
Thank you very much. I will now begin. This policy session is intended to satisfy the requirements under ORS 192.6607C to allow the Board of County Commissioners to hold executive sessions later in the process to consider the employment of the county council. The executive session allows for candid discussions among the board and others concerning the recruitment process and the prospective candidates. Moreover, it allows for maintaining the confidentiality of the applicants to ensure the most competitive recruitment and screening process. To satisfy the statute, at this policy session, there will be an opportunity for public comment on the employment of the public official or county counsel for this recruitment. This session will proceed as follows. Number one, first, we will hear a presentation from staff on the proposed position profile and hiring process. 3, then we will take public comment both in person and virtually. 3, the board will then deliberate and either render a decision today or continue this discussion to a future meeting. Gary, would you please introduce the presenters?
Yes, thank you, Chair Smith. Our presenter today is Jared Haddock, who is the Recruitment Manager in Human Resources, and Steve Worthington, who is Senior Consultant with Prothman, is on Zoom in case you have any questions.
Okay.
Jared, go ahead, please.
Perfect. Thank you. Good morning, Chair Smith and Commissioners. Feels like we've been on this road, and I've been in front of you a number of times, and so I'm happy to bring forward the position profile for the county council position. This was, as you know, put together by Prothman. I do want to recognize the hard work of staff who may be listening as well that provided Prothman information to help build this. As previously discussed, this profile will be what is going to be used to essentially post the job and attract those candidates and hopefully draw them in. This position profile covers aspects of the county, the community, the office, the position, benefits. So it's a wide range of information that applicants will be able to review to view this opportunity. And so the other document that we are hoping to get your approval as well is the hiring procedures. Now, you'll notice that this hopefully will look familiar as it is a mirrored image of the scope of work. And we need to be able to satisfy requirements under ORS 192.660 of adoption of hiring procedures to be able to move forward to executive sessions. So that is the second document. And again, that is just an iteration of the scope of work that we went over with you when we selected Prothman, so no really changes there. I would love to be able to hear feedback from this board on the position profile. As always, this board directs the county council, and certainly we're working with you on this recruitment and making sure that it is representative of what you want to see. So should there be any changes or adjustments, we'd be more than happy to make those.
Great. The board would now like to open the session to public comment and invite any member of the public to speak to the matter under consideration. I will begin with those folks in the room who would like to testify. Please present a blue card, although I see no one in the room who wants to testify on this matter. Tony, we'll move to Zoom. Is there anyone online who would like to testify?
If you would like to testify on this matter, please use the raise hand feature and I will call on you in the order received. Madam Chair, I do not have any hands raised.
Thank you. We're going through this much faster than I thought we would, by the way. Before I entertain a motion, I want to open it up to commissioner comments based on the material that was presented. We all gave at the last meeting, our wishes of the type of person we like to see. We will also have an opportunity for individual interviews with Prothman to move forward on this, but I would like to know, commissioners, what you think of the documents thus presented and how you would like to proceed. I believe Commissioner Savas, you're up first.
Yeah, I'm struggling with one of the bullets here. I don't know which pages aren't numbered. I guess it's page 6 of the packet. On the right-hand side, there's a bullet that says, an understanding of how to effectively support state policy changes that Clackamas County has established as state legislative priorities. And I have some discomfort with limiting it to that, because if it's not a statewide legislative priority, but it happens to impact the county severely, whether it's in the crafting of or the, challenges thereafter the bill's approved, but I think it just seems to be very narrow. And I'm not comfortable, I don't know if there's a small edit that can be made there, but I don't have comfort about that. I mean, certainly that should be a priority if it's a board priority or one of our priorities. However, I wouldn't want to limit it to that.
Okay.
Do you understand
Gary,
what's
do you have any
being said?
suggestions?
May I ask, would it be more that the council is supporting the legislative request you are making, or once the state approves the law, he or she is going to help understand how to administer that law by still following the board's directives? I guess I'm not
Well,
sure.
I'm just kind of at a loss of what, I thought I don't know where this came from. So if it came from my comments, so I would want to apologize if I somehow was referring to that narrow definition, but my comments last time we met talking about this profile issue was that externally that our legal counsel and office employees are mindful or watching any legislation that would have impacts to the county. So in that way I worded it, would not have limits to it being a priority. But if it has severe impacts, we ought to be watching and be mindful of it.
I get it.
And that was part of that external aspect that I was speaking to, and we talked about internal versus external. This was an external element. So that was my intent, if that's where this came from.
Sure. And we can work on changing that language to broaden that, and not have it so narrow, as you
Okay.
pointed out,
All right,
Commissioner
thank you.
Salvis.
I'm not sure who was next.
It doesn't matter to me.
Commissioner Shaw.
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to say that the material appears to me provides a very good look at what Clackamas County is, what we are looking for in a candidate, what the duties are, and what the process is for that candidate should they be interviewed. So this, to me, is well thought out, and I know we can maybe change a word here and there, but overall, I think this is very effective, and I think we should just go ahead and go with it this morning.
Commissioner West.
Well, gosh, I look at the first part of this document, and it reminds me why I moved to Clackamas County. You guys put some really great highlights of what makes Clackamas County so awesome. I know we all believe that. Couple things, I like the, where we lay out the positions, and I don't know where this would fall, my critique. I have a critique here on this. This is a lovely document, though, and really well done overall. Maybe under ideal candidate, I think it falls a little bit better. There's not a strong enough statement on what type of broad and extensive leadership we expect this candidate to have, like a specific leadership statement. We dance around it a little bit with some of these bullet points, but I mean, I see this as somebody that has the experience, the ability to run a law office basically, while also a little bit being a competent jack of all trades legally, while also being able to lead people that are very specialized within their field of law, right? Like, we don't need necessarily this candidate to be the expert in land use, but he or she will be managing somebody that is an expert in that. So just a really solid, robust need for leadership. So I think that could be a nice thing to add under ideal candidate as a bullet point.
Yes, I mentioned that before on leadership, and I was going to make comments in my individual interview on that. I mean, it's a given that they're a licensed attorney. It's a given that they've had experience doing all these things. And of course, you have to listen to minimum qualifications. So, according to law, I get that. But this position, as we've said before, is going to require some extraordinary leadership and a voice.
Mm-hmm.
Voice is very, and I can explain that later, what I think the voice means. We've all experienced that with our current chief counsel, and he has a very good voice in instructing us within the parameters of the law as he sees it. Now, we may disagree with that, okay? We may agree with that. But it's communicated well. And so when you add to leadership, well, the communication skills are equally as important.
Thank you.
Okay. Anything else, commissioners? We have two motions here. Gary, one on position profile and then one on hiring procedures. Can we lump those together in one motion?
Sure, yes.
Okay. I will entertain a motion. I think it's on page.
Yes, I move that we approve the position profile and hiring procedures as presented this morning.
Second.
Yes, Commissioner Shull has moved that we approve the position profile, option one, the hiring procedures, approve option one for county council, and Commissioner Schrader has seconded that motion. Thank
Make
you.
a friendly amendment, Chair.
Yeah,
My amendment would be to address the issues, the few critiques that we made here at the board within this final approval.
Yeah, small, minor amendments as,
So as amended would be tag that onto end your motion,
As amended.
yeah, if
Commissioner
you
Shull,
agree.
you're the maker of the motion.
Is it clearly understood what those amendments are?
Yes, one is to change the bullet on page 4 addressing the legislative support, and the second is to, in the ideal candidate section, to talk more about the leadership, the voice, the communication skills expected in this position, in the opening paragraph there.
Okay, very good. That's fine.
Schrader, do you second that motion?
I second that motion.
Okay, motion has been made and seconded. Is it clear?
It's clear to me, Jared, is it clear to you?
It's clear to me.
Okay, good, thank you. Any further discussion? Tony, would you please take the poll?
Commissioner Savas,
aye.
Commissioner West,
Aye.
Commissioner Schrader,
Aye.
Commissioner Shull,
Aye.
Chair Smith.
Aye, motion passes 5-0. Well, Commissioners, I want to thank you. We went through this much faster than we had thought because we had to hold a quasi-public hearing, and frankly, we could have had a lot of people here today. So if there's anything else, we have opportunity to discuss anything that you may think that you did not have time to do. I'm more than happy to entertain that now in a broader discussion on the issues that we didn't have time. You know, in retrospect, Gary, I would have made our state and federal priorities an hour session, and this could have been a half hour. But that's the difficulty in scheduling meetings. You just really don't know what it's going to be. Commissioner Shull, you had your light on.
Yes, yesterday, Commissioner Schrader, when you were gone, we had a discussion about the appointment of one of our board members to the AOC Board of Directors to sit on the voting position for counties over 250,000. Yesterday, all these months and meetings kind of run together. I lost track of how long I had been in that position. I'd actually been there since January 2022. Commissioner West has expressed the desire to be appointed because AOC is looking for the update on all the appointments to the Board of Directors. So I'd like to recommend that the board consider appointing Commissioner West as of 1 January as our rep to the AOC Board of Directors for counties over 250,000 people as a voting member.
Well, I think that would be delightful, and that is so generous and gracious of you. I would be glad to second that motion and work with my colleague, Commissioner West, and then continue to work with you, I hope, on anything you need from me, Commissioner Shull.
Okay, thank you.
And you're lucky in a way, because I am permanently on that board.
I know you.
Because I was AOC president, so I never, and I have my third term as on the executive committee because other people kept leaving. But finally, I think, I can just go to the board meeting.
As they say, Commissioner Schrader, no good deed goes unpunished.
I know. I still feel bad about impact, but that's okay.
Anyway, I don't know if we need a motion, Chair Smith, this
Gary,
morning to
can we
do
go ahead
that.
and do that today?
Do it now, and yes, you need a motion.
Commissioner Shull, would you like to make a motion?
Yes, I would. I would like to move to appoint Commissioner West to the AOC Board of Directors, voting member for counties over 250,000.
I'll second that.
There's a motion on the table to appoint Commissioner West to AOC Board of Counties over 250,000 population, and Commissioner Schrader has seconded that motion. I see two other lights on, which we will get to you folks. But do you have any comments regarding the motion on the table? Commissioner West.
I will say, Commissioner Scholl, you have big shoes to fill, and you are a gentleman. I know that you served incredibly well on that board of directors and represented this county, and so I very much appreciate you helping facilitate me having an opportunity to do that. It means a lot to me, and I just wanted to personally thank you publicly.
Commissioner Scholl, thank you for that. I appreciate it. Yesterday, Commissioner Schrader, we moved to put this off till next week because you weren't here. And it was my desire to have you here because you have an extensive knowledge of happenings at AOC and the national, and you could help us maneuver through this. But you have been very generous and gracious, Commissioner Scholl, and I appreciate that deeply. Commissioner Savas, do you have a comment?
Yeah, well, yeah, I agree. That was what we were expecting to discuss it next week. And I appreciate the discussion thus far, but the point I was trying to make yesterday, and maybe there's a misunderstanding, I want to make sure that the person, in this case, maybe Commissioner West, realizes that the responsibility and what the purpose of that legislative board is, and that you're there.
Oh, yeah, be there.
And for all the responsibilities that come with it. That's why I pulled back from it, because I knew I didn't have the time, because after HB 2017 passed, I did not have the time to make the commitment to attend all the meetings. So I felt bad because I was not representing Clackamas County at the table. And to me, the imperative is not what the topic might be or the interest level is. It's really about the board, the AOC board, legislative board. That's the imperative. So if you have the time and the commitment, great. I'll support that. All I need to do is hear that you are willing to do that and recognize that's a responsibility.
Commissioner West.
I appreciate that, and I understand that it comes with a heavy responsibility. Over the last several months, I have spent hours and hours and long afternoons in Salem on this steering committee with AOC on this addiction and housing crisis that we're trying to deal with. So I've already been putting in a significant amount of hours that way with supporting AOC, and look forward to serving with the new president to help AOC be even more effective than maybe it's been in the past. So it's something that I think has naturally just developed in a way for me to serve, and so you can be assured that I will be there and show up the way that's expected.
Yeah, as long as, I understand your strong interest in that particular topic that you just reiterated here again. My point is not that, but my point is just the legislative responsibilities representing Clackamas County from a legislative perspective, not, what the board does. It's organizational. It's not topic-oriented. That's what the legislative board does.
And I think that's a good point, because it's our expectation that you would do this. And that's why I do not take an active role in AOC. I can't possibly attend, even when they're on Zoom. And Commissioner West, you do have a significant block of time that you have indicated that you will be gone in February and March. How are you going to be able to handle that if and when an AOC opportunity comes up for a meeting?
Yeah, the new president and AOC is aware that I will have to be away for sometime in the first quarter to serve in the Navy. But when available and when I can, and I'll do my best to serve by Zoom. And I can't control when and where the Navy is going to send me and how they send me. But I feel like that I can, as you say, Chair, chew gum and walk at the same time.
I can chew gum at the same time.
Yeah, so we'll figure it out. But it is a large board, and so when I am available and not serving in the Navy, then I'll be there in full force for Clackamas County. And when I am serving in the Navy, that's why there's more than one board member.
That's right. Commissioner Scholl?
Well, the United States Navy will not have any time to put you on Zoom to the Clackamas County. That's not going to happen. So we need to have some sort of alternate, should he not be there. Because the Navy doesn't care about Clackamas County, I guarantee you. And you're not going to be on the Zoom to do that. That's not going to happen. The other thing, too, is when it's appointed to the Board of Directors, you're on the Legislative Committee. The Legislative Committee has to take time to review the recommendations from the different steering committees on all the issues, and you have to then look at that based on what the board said are our legislative priorities, and you heard about them today. So there's a lot of involvement with that. Another thing, too, sometimes, gifts come with things that you might not expect, and that is a lot of times you'll have a short fuse from the time you receive the information from the legislative committees before the steering committees, before the legislative committee sits down to review them. So you have very little time to bounce it off your fellow commissioners. What do you think about this idea from, this steering committee, for example? So, I mean, there's a lot going on. I've done it for 2 years. I think you would enjoy the experience, but just remember, it's a lot of time and a lot of meetings.
Before I call on Paul, I asked Commissioner Schrader the question that you brought up regarding an alternative, if Commissioner West is sequestered by the Navy to go, and what is your comment on that?
My comment is, I think that you can.
In the microphone, please.
Oh, I believe you can be an alternate and help with that position. I don't think there would be any problem with the Association of Oregon Counties. They just want somebody from our county who's good. And I have noticed that, I know, Commissioner West, you have a very good working relationship with the new president. So here's my early Christmas surprise for you, is I did, when I was at NACO this last time, I spoke to our board there. That's Mary Jo, who's our president now, J.D. Clark, let's see, the guy from Sonoma, sorry, his name eludes me, he's going to be there. And if and when you can make any of those meetings, I've already talked to them about setting up meetings with you and Commissioner Bethel. And of course, colleagues, if you would like to join us at any of the NACO conferences, I'm sure we could have a whole dinner with that leadership and really have some opportunities to see together as the value of that. But just thought I'd tell you, I put in a good word for because she's going to be president, and I know that you're very involved in recovery issues. So
Can I make a friendly amendment to the motion?
No.
I don't think
Or you don't need an alternate?
No, we'll just, the issue is you will both cover it, and it's not going to be an issue. It's not
Okay,
gonna be an
you
issue.
don't need, okay.
Commissioner Samus.
Yeah, so I would happily support Commissioner Scholl as an alternate if that's indeed a possibility, but so I'm not seeking the position. I'm explaining to you why I stepped back, and I want to make sure that Clackamas County is represented, especially with the pressure right now going on between the other two larger counties. There's a lot of issues, and it's at least a day, that AOC day is at least a full day, and as Commissioner Scholl properly outlined, you're going to carry a number of issues that you need to read before the meeting, after those sessions, and sometimes it's 2 days. And now that they're splitting it up across the week, that's why I had to step down, because I couldn't do all my transportation stuff. So that's what we need, and I don't want to have us not represented. So it's just critical that we're there, we're paying dues, and I really respect and appreciate all the work that everyone does. But if Multnomah County is not going to show up, and Washington County is not going to show up, and I don't know if that was an indication of the AOC conference, but I'm more concerned that if this region's not there, it's going to be more work and more problems than it was before. So buckle up, that's all I'm saying. Happy to support you, but I want to let you know, please, I want to make sure you're there.
Thank you. Commissioner Schrader.
Yeah, we've been aware of that. This is, and all the time I've been here, honestly, it goes back and forth like that pretty consistently. But Gina, our executive director has done a fantastic job, keeping that. And it's sometimes I call it's a bit of the urban-rural divide, and our county is everything, unlike any other county in the state. So we're all of it. We truly are. We're very unique. And trying to keep that open communication with the folks from the north, and there's a little bit of hard feelings, but I think we can work through them. Well, you know me, I can't hold a grudge against anything or anybody, so I think if we work in that direction, we'll be fine. So.
Thank you. Commissioner Shaw.
Yes, I kind of like to summarize what Commissioner Schrader just said. Clackamas County is a little country and a little bit rock and roll. Is that right, Commissioner Schrader?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
And I've lived in both worlds, too. I speak multiple languages now. No.
Okay. Thank you, commissioners, and thank you, Commissioner Shaw, for bringing this up. We have a motion on the table, and Tony, would you please take the poll?
Commissioner West,
Aye.
Commissioner Savas,
Aye.
Commissioner Schrader,
Aye.
Commissioner Shaw,
Aye.
Chair Smith.
Aye, motion passes 5-0. Yeehaw. Commissioners, is there anything else you would like to take up? Ben?
From our legislative update and priorities, maybe a couple questions that we might want to consider that we didn't get to today was we talk about in the packet a little bit like where the priorities have been legislatively. And I know that Lori Chavez-DeRemer, Congresswoman, I believe is on a new, I don't know if correct me if I'm wrong, I might butcher the committee, it's some committee that specifically focuses on addiction and homelessness and mental health issues. I believe it was that she was appointed to it. It's my understanding, a significant opportunity to bring federal resources to local communities like ours. I know that she kind of has that mayor's heart as being a mayor from Happy Valley for Clackamas County, so she understands kind of the role of the boots on the ground. I wanted to know if we are engaged with her while she's in that committee, and if we're going to see any potential federal support is one of my questions, and what is the update on that and her role in that committee? And then my other question was an update on her strategy we didn't quite get into it, around the tolling issue and her language in the appropriations legislation that's right around the corner here in December. It's happening in December, and what that strategy is around that. So those are two updates that I would like to have.
All right, we can get those.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Savas.
Yeah, just one curious question. In the earlier discussion about the meeting agenda, the half hour we were talking about, Chair, you mentioned, just kind of curious, that we had asked not to work in the afternoons. I was curious, I don't recall that conversation. So who indicated of us that we did not want to work in the afternoons?
I didn't make the statement that nobody wants to work in the afternoons. I have scheduled meetings in the afternoons, and I've had to cancel them because there was not a quorum available. Thank you very much.
So we'll have to be better on that.
Well, I mean, I've done it. It is problematic. I mean, and I've also tried to move the meetings to 9:30 instead of 10 o'clock. I've tried to move the meetings to 9 o'clock. Okay, I get pushback from staff. Gary, you and I have had these discussions, and frankly, those suggestions have not been taken to heart by staff, and frankly, I don't know why. So how the agenda is set, commissioners. Usually, we are dependent on staff presenting us with information. They make a packet. They put together a packet based on all the input we get from commissioners, and there's a time on that. Well, how much do we do? And more than likely, in our agenda-setting meetings, we are saying, well, how much time is this going to take? How much time is this going to take? And the first question is time, not topic. So can we fit this in here? Can we fit this in here? And so today's meeting, as I've already explained what happened here, but it is my observation, as well as staff's observation, that afternoon meetings are not well attended by commissioners, because what happens is commissioners will go and put stuff on their calendar for the afternoons. that has to do with county business, and that is appropriate. So when we do this, we're also looking at your individual schedules as well to see if you're here or not. And I'm trying to manage, everything with the help of Gary and the other staff on that. Commissioner Savas.
Yeah, we've had portions of this conversation for a while here, and I just want to restate that I became accustomed for many, many years that we worked Monday mornings, broke for lunch, came back, worked Tuesday afternoons, and we were very good at making sure, obviously, that because of that regiment, and Wednesdays, by the way, because the overflow would be taken care of Wednesdays, I was accustomed to that schedule. So our staff, our PAs, and everyone knew that we wouldn't schedule anything on Tuesday mornings and Tuesday afternoons because that was regular work sessions. The work sessions have been dramatically rolled back, and I found those informative. I found them educational. And without that, I don't feel as though I'm doing all the work that we ought to be doing in all the different aspects. Certainly, I'm spending that time on transportation, granted. I'm not asking for more work, but I do think that the job warrants more time with us together, working together in work sessions than we've currently been doing for the last year or 2 years.
I would agree with that, and that's why at our retreat, we wanted to implement planning sessions. And I have scheduled planning sessions, and frankly, I've canceled more planning sessions than we've had. Right, Gary?
That is correct, yes.
And so it's a conundrum. And these planning sessions, I believe, all 5 commissioners need to be present. If just 2 or 3 of us show up, then it's not representative of all commissioners' thoughts, or it's not representative of the county as a whole. So Commissioner Savas, I hear what you say, but the reality of the situation is, since I became chair, we work on Tuesday mornings and afternoons, but a lot of times, commissioners, on Tuesdays, you're off for lunch and you don't want to come back. Oh, we have come back. And I implemented Wednesday mornings at the request of staff, because staff say it's extremely hard on them to have everything done on a Tuesday. So that's why we have gone to Wednesday. Is that correct?
That is correct, and I'm your staff, so let me clarify. I always recommend times to the chair on policy sessions. That's me. And for the last 5 or 6 years, your legislative agendas have been approved in 15 or 20 minutes. And so I assumed that would be the case today, and I was wrong. So that's on me, not the chair. I've asked for consistency on when you meet. If you meet at 9 a.m. on Tuesdays and 10 a.m. on Wednesdays and 7 a.m. on Thursdays, that's confusing to the public and to our staff. So I just asked for a consistent start time, but I work for you. So if you want something different, I take guidance from the chair. But everything, she listens to my recommendations, and I'm grateful for that, Chair Smith. Thank you.
And I've tried to listen to the commissioners, too, to get the largest, bang for our buck on this. Yeah, commissioners, we have done a tremendous amount of work in the last 3 years, and I think we need to look at our successes and be very happy with what we've accomplished. Have we solved all society's ills? No, we haven't, but we're working on it. And so I want to thank you all for your input. I want to thank you for your good work today. Seeing no further business before this commission, we are adjourned.